Hi, everyone. So we're getting ready to move over to the next segment of our session here today. Very important, especially with all the questions being submitted through the Q&A while Dawn was speaking. A lot of that information is going to be covered in this session here. We're going to hear from faculty members that are part of the admissions committee. They have been for quite some time. Between the two of them, I think they've probably read thousands of applications and conducted hundreds of interviews with potential grad students. So they will be able to provide a wealth of knowledge to you. So I would be very happy to introduce Professor Ashok Deniz and Professor Michalina Janiszewska. I'll have them go ahead and just give a quick introduction of who they are, and then we'll get started with some questions. So why don't we start with Michalina?
All right, thank you so much. It's great to be here. A very exciting time for everyone. So my name is Michalina Janiszewska. I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Molecular Medicine at Scripps, Florida, and my lab works on cancer biology. And I take part in the admissions committee. Probably it's my fifth round, right? It's sixth round actually this time. So hopefully I'll be able to address all the questions that you may have.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Ashok Deniz. As Shannon mentioned, I'm a professor in the structural biology department on the La Jolla campus. Our lab's generally interested in sort of basic biophysics of proteins and RNA, both at the molecular level and also at larger scale levels, making these materials that are really important in cells, both for function and disease. Also, as Shannon pointed out, I've been involved in the admissions process for a few years or so.
Perfect. Let's get straight into it. So I think what we'll do is I'll go ahead and ask a question, and then if we can, maybe we'll follow the same order. Maybe Michalina, if you want to answer first, and then followed by Ashok. So the question, I guess a really top question, what would be on everyone's mind is, what makes a competitive applicant? What are you looking for when you're reviewing applications? How can an applicant stand out amongst the rest?
So I think that's a very personal question, I would say, because each one of us has a little bit different view of what an ideal candidate for a graduate student looks like. But we do follow a standardized process here. So we actually have rubrics which allow us to basically give points for different aspects of the student's application. But I guess the most important thing that really makes an application stand out is what we call the grit. So basically, in the main statement, in the personal statement, the question that is asked there, it asks a student to present some kind of challenge that they went through and how they overcame the challenge. And this is basically a really important aspect of that statement, because we want to learn a little bit more about your personality, and we want to see whether you could demonstrate, first of all, your passion for science. You could explain a little bit of why you want to pursue a PhD, but then also whether we could see from this little written statement whether the student actually will be able to survive all the challenges that the graduate studies are going to bring to them. Because very often you have to troubleshoot, you have to go through all kinds of different difficulties. And if you have an example of from your past research experience where you've actually had some kind of challenge that's you were able to overcome by, I don't know, either seeking advice or by doing a literature search, and if you can give us specific examples of that, that's very helpful for us to actually see an example where you would be able basically to apply exactly the same skills to your graduate studies.
So I can add to that. So I completely, second what Michalina mentioned, all those things, and basically, challenges. As you might know already, research is like a very exciting thing to do, but kind of coupled with that, and maybe because of that, is also very challenging, because you're going into areas that have not been looked at before. So of course, you don't know what you're going to find, and that's the exciting part, of course. So, but there's a lot of times, obviously sometimes things might work right away, but there'll be times when things don't. And as Michalina pointed out, it's really important to for you to know, one, that you want to do this, this kind of thing, and for us to get that feel from your whole application. So I'll just mention, we do a very holistic review of all the components of the application. So definitely, there's, if you think there's some points in your application that are weaker than others, then try to, discuss maybe why that is the case. Tell us maybe you face some challenges along the way and how you overcame them. But you can, as I said, the committee basically looks at your whole application very holistically. So definitely, if the other strong things, that's a huge plus. Research experience is a plus for sure, since that's the major part of a PhD. I'd like to say at the end of the PhD, you will be more of an expert on the topic of your research than pretty much anyone else in the world, because you're focused on that and done that for several years. So think about what it would take for you to explain why you're excited about that, as Michalina mentioned. So in the personal statement, definitely tell us about your trajectory, why you got in, why you're excited about it, and the ups and downs that might have informed that, and what you want to do in the future if you have thoughts on that.
Great, thank you. That leads me into the next question. I think we touched on it a little bit, but how important is research experience when applying? And second part, will it hurt the applicant if their research experience is in a different field or a different field to what they're interested in applying for in grad school?
So I guess the research experience is very, very helpful, because basically, if you already have tried research in one form or another, it may be more or less extensive. If you can describe it and basically show us that you can show your passion for research, and also if you have gained some skills, that also helps us to sort of imagine like how a person would actually fare in a lab setting, right? Because so that's why it's kind of good to try research first before committing to full on to doing a doctoral studies, just because like this you get a little bit more experience and you actually see how different doing research in a lab is compared to taking classes in school, right? So basically at the university you're doing everything for a certain grade and for certain skills, and here you're kind of going into an uncharted territory, and it's really important to to get a little bit of a feel of what it is to actually fail, what it is to have technical problems and challenges, and basically how to search for solutions. So I would say that having research experience is something that we definitely weigh pretty heavily. And then what was the other part of the question?
If is it important to have experience, or what if their research?
Interdisciplinarity. Yes. So I would say absolutely not. So it's actually the beauty of the Scripps program is that the program is joined between the biology and chemistry. So that means that students can sort of still experience various ways of life sciences, let's say. So that means that if you have a degree in anything that can justify you pursuing studies in life sciences, in chemical and biological sciences, then that basically is not a minus. It's actually it may serve even better, because if you can somehow link your past experience of your degree with what you want to do next, and explain in your statement why what you were pursuing, like this is the path needs to turn a little bit, and why you want to pursue something else right now, this is actually a pretty great thing that can make an application stand out as well.
I have only a couple of things to add. So yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, again, in the personal statement and the research statement, you can really highlight, how whatever research you did before, how you thought about it, what kind of skills, and in terms of both, not just the particular research, but kind of the generalized framework for research, which is actually one of the things about a PhD, right? You learn how to think about problems and then solve problems, which can be applied in different areas. Certainly, specific skills can also help, but Michalina answered that question. Definitely, I would say one of the things to think about also is in the research statement, just also try to highlight, your scholarly approach, and even if you did research that was in a different area, how you thought big, just convey to us. That would be very helpful.
Perfect. So switching gears a little bit, this is a question we get very, very frequently. Is it recommended for applicants to reach out to potential supervisors and faculty either before they apply or during the admissions process? Is it recommended to contact faculty? And if so, what would be the best approach to contacting faculty members?
I guess there is a debate about this, whether this is useful or not useful. I usually think it does not hurt to say that, just send a short email to a faculty member saying, that you're interested in somebody's research. It always helps, and basically it definitely may help to identify your name on the list of the applications to be read, so that the person actually is aware of the fact that there is a student potentially interested in their lab. Some people probably don't reply to these emails just because they are way too busy, so don't feel bad if you don't hear anything or if you receive a very, very short response. But it's definitely, so I guess it's not, it doesn't really help. It doesn't hurt as well. So it's, it may help a little bit, but I don't think it's really necessary as well. But that's my opinion. So maybe different for different people.
I agree with Michalina. I mean, there are certainly examples where it's helpful to reach out. At the minimum, if you make a good discussion with a faculty member beforehand, just to learn about their research in more detail, and even just looking up faculty research interests in more detail, that's an important thing. It can be conveyed in the personal statement, for example. Actually, that is a very useful thing to add, to actually talk about 2 to 4 faculty members whose research areas you're particularly interested in, and mention a little bit more detail about why, so that we know you've thought about it and this is something you're very interested in. So both for your own interest, right? You want to know what kind of research goes on here, and for us to know that you thought about it. That would be useful.
Great. Next question is, does the high number of postdocs that we have on our campuses result in faculty being a little bit less on with students? Or would you say, I know it's different, per lab, every mentor style is different, but how do you think having postdocs, the high number of postdocs that we have, does that affect relation with the mentor or faculty mentor and the student?
I think it really depends on the lab, because there's definitely some labs which are more postdoc heavy, so where majority of the people in the lab are postdocs, and there are some labs where there is majority of the students. But I don't think you can make a general assessment of how that affects the dynamic between the PI and the student, because I think all of the PIs who are participating in the graduate program, they do know what to expect from a student, and how working with a student is slightly different than working with a postdoc. So I don't think there is a general rule of that could say that it's better to apply to a lab which has more students or less students. I don't think that's an easy question to answer.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. It'll probably vary by lab to some degree, but I think in general, the postdoc as in labs basically really enhance the PhD experience, because they're even if your advisor meets with you very regularly, they're just right next to you at the bench, and it's really a very close learning experience. I know personally, in our lab that has been the case, that postdocs are really helpful. I tend to interact a lot with students, even adjoining labs where we collaborate with, and so on and so forth. Postdocs are really helpful, while the PI is still involved a lot. So that's what I'd say.
Great. In your experience, what makes Scripps stand out from other institutes, and what resources have you found to be most helpful at Scripps?
So for me, it's actually the lack of barriers between the departments. That's what really stands out, because the program is the doctoral program is joined across all of the departments. That basically facilitates sort of the cross between, it's way easier to find out actually what people in chemistry are doing versus what people in neurobiology are doing versus people in molecular medicine. And I feel like participating in the committee meetings for the students who are on those different tracks, it actually really expands my personal sort of experience. And I do learn a lot from these interdisciplinary meetings. So I think that's probably the biggest difference that I see. And basically the fact that the students also don't really have to commit to a particular track right away. By doing the rotations, that they actually can jump between the different departments, and then also kind of enriches the environment, because like this they learn more about what is going on in different labs. They get to try different techniques, different approaches to research, and then once they pick a lab, they still sort of create this network of connections, which really allows them to reach out afterwards. And so, very often people who rotated in a lab end up actually collaborating with that lab just because they actually learned what that lab is doing and what kind of techniques can be useful in their own research afterwards. So that's for me.
Just a couple of things to add. The collaboration aspect is something I also bring up a lot. It's very open, and as I think you heard from Dawn, even the coursework and so on, it's very open what you do with that, the rotations and so on and so forth, as Michalina mentioned. I can give you a couple of examples even from our lab where projects we probably wouldn't have done, but the grad student actually initiated a collaboration. And so it's very exciting. I tend to actually encourage students and postdocs to come up with their own ideas. I really like that. So that's actually a great plus. I would say also that the grad student body is really a great set of grad students we have. So I think in addition to the labs and so on, that interaction and so on is a great thing. I would say it's not just because I'm at Scripps, but I actually think the Scripps faculty is a great set of faculty. And lastly, I'll just point out that the Don and the grad office, they're really supportive of the students. So it's a really supportive atmosphere, right?
Thank you. Another question is, what advice would you give someone that has several years of industry experience, especially if their last research project was a few years ago?
So I guess we do occasionally see applications from people who have done industry jobs sort of after graduating. They worked for a couple of years in industry, and I think those applications are also kind of interesting usually, because people who do this, they usually have a clear idea for why they actually need to do a PhD, and they have some ideas about what kind of skills they want to gain, because they've worked already in the industry setting, and they know what kind of skills they need to develop to actually move forward with their careers. And what I think is also different about Scripps is that there's a lot of faculty who actually have ties with industry. So definitely we are all aware here that the academic route is not the only way to stay in science, and that basically working with industry partner can actually greatly enhance the experience for everybody. So I would say that the program also does focus on multiple skills that are actually very nicely transferable to the industry jobs afterwards.
Perfect. Another question we just got in was, how much weight is given to undergraduate publications when considering an applicant?
Ashok, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So thanks, Michalina. So yeah, I mean, it is definitely a strength to have a publication, but it's definitely not a necessity. So if you have one, certainly list it, and importantly, tell us, what your contribution was, and kind of just illustrate that you thought about it a lot. And of course, your advisor who is associated with the paper whose lab you did that, and would also talk about it in their letter. So it's, as I said, it's a strength, but not essential. So yeah, but I'll just emphasize again, we look at the applications very holistically.
Okay, perfect. Another question, let's see here. We're getting close to the end of our session here, so I want to make sure we've covered most of the hot topics here. We did have a question about recommendation letters. If it would be a hindrance to the applicant if their letters come from people that do not hold a PhD, is there anything that the committee looks for in terms of who the student should ask? It should ask for a recommendation letter. Who do you like to see the letters coming from?
Because for us, the easiest way to view the letters is if they are coming from somebody who knows you well and who you worked with in terms of research experience. So basically, letters from advisors who supervise your lab work are really helpful. I think it's usually better if they are coming from somebody who has substantial experience with mentoring students. So for example, if you have been working with a graduate student, it's better to actually ask the advisor, so the PI of the lab that you worked with, for that recommendation letter rather than the student, just because the PI can sort of better judge your progress compared to the other mentees that they have in the lab, and they can provide a little bit more perspective on how your skills that you've demonstrated in your research and in your experience in that particular lab, how that prepares you for the graduate school afterwards. So I would say it's a little bit better to have those letters to be actually from research mentors or people who know you really well, who have seen students move on to graduate career.
Yeah, I didn't have very much to add to that. I completely agree. And I'll just mention, if it's you could have letters from people who taught you a class and so on. So that, as long as they really interacted with you substantially and can say something specific, that is pretty helpful as an additional thing.
Okay, I think if we have time, we have two really great questions. First, I'll ask, we sort of covered the way that the applications are reviewed holistically. We're not looking for one specific thing, but a lot of questions come up around the GPA, about how important GPA is, how much weight is put on GPA, and then if the student feels that maybe their grades are a little bit on the lower end, what can they do to make up for that, or to keep their application competitive?
So I think it's really that's exactly where your personal statement comes into play. Because if you think that your GPA is suffering a little bit and it's not as good as it was, please mention just why that is. If you struggled through some difficulties in your classes or in your personal life, you can actually put that in the statement and explain why your GPA was lower than what you would like it to be. And that's definitely not a deal breaker. So we do look at that because of course, this is a highly competitive program, so we have to look at all of the components of the application. But then, yeah, I guess we have seen multiple cases where people have had actually a great explanation for why the GPAs were not amazing, and they had a very solid proof of research experience that would basically just alleviate any concerns that we may have because of the GPA.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think just explaining it and trying to explain what you did to supplement that or balance that out. That would be really useful. Yeah, basically what Michalina mentioned.
Great. And then I think we might end on this question, kind of switching gears. Once we get to the interview stage, if a student is invited out to interview, what should they be doing to prepare for these interviews? And can you give maybe kind of a quick example of the types of questions that they might be asked during the interview, and how can they pretty much just prepare to interview at Scripps?
So Ashok, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I would say sort of one thing that would be important to do is to look at the list of faculty you'll be meeting with and all the faculty you're interested in, potentially working with at Scripps, and just learn as much as you can about their research, so that when you meet them, they also see that you've done your homework and you're actually interested in and thought about the research a little bit. Can maybe even start talking initially about potential projects and so on and so forth. And one thing I'll just mention is even if one of the faculty members you're interested in is not on your list because of scheduling, it's a pretty complex process, there are opportunities where you can meet with them in additional times that are possible and so on and so forth. So definitely do your homework. I think that's a major thing. Other than that, have a really nice explanation, kind of discussion of your work. So kind of your research, what you have done, and any things that are related to your personal statement that you want to discuss with faculty members. I would say that.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that.
Perfect. And we do still have a few more minutes, so we can ask kind of what I think what would be a great question to end on is, what makes a successful student at Scripps? What does a successful student look like?
That's a difficult question. I would say every student is different. So I think that's the beautiful thing about this program, that people are coming into the program with various different experiences. In terms of their research experience and sort of other, where they majored, what they majored in, and what they are interested in. A successful student, I guess, a successful student is just somebody who's happy with their choice of project and who is constantly excited about what they are working on, and somebody who's not afraid to make mistakes and own them and learn from them and just keep going doing research.
Yeah, I completely agree with Michalina. There's many ways to be successful, and I think Don would have shown you, all the different kinds of things students do during and also after grad school at Scripps. A lot of different ways to be successful.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you again to Ashok and Michalina, for all your wonderful advice and tips. And for all those out there, if we were not able to answer your questions, if you still have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Paolo, my colleague, who I'm about to turn it over to here. We are the admissions department at Scripps. So throughout your time during applying and through the whole process, we're happy to help. And on that, I will turn it over to Paolo. Thank you.